347 million US-Dollars. This was the amount the Israeli Scaleup Future Meat has announced in its Series-B round last year for its cultivated meat technology. It is so far one of the largest investments ever made in this game-changing technology. And today we have Yaron Sfadyah with us. He is he's Director of Business Development from Future Meat. And today we want to talk about the climate impact and market opportunities of this technology. A very warm welcome here in our studio.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you were founded in 2018. And first of all, how you came up with this idea? So what was the beginning of Future Meat?
Right. So the company was founded by Professor Kobi Nachmias from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's really a world-renowned professor. Engineer by training, chemical engineer. He thought, how can this be done from day one, which is already cost-effective and scalable? Because he knows what is, cultivation of cells and the process. And it's a hard process, it's an expensive process, and very not easy to do a commodity product such as meat. So from day one, looking at this problem, he started gathering ideas and concepts and a team around this. And we have a number of technological advancements in our technology that really enabled this and allowed us to reach where we are now with a strong team of shareholders to help us grow this forward. So the thought was really, okay, there's a need for alternative meats. The different alternatives that we have today are not quite there yet at the time. And so the question was, how do we do this cost-effectively, scalable, and tasty and healthy? And this is how the journey started. And when Professor Nachmias started this, there was a small team. Slowly it grew. When I joined the company about a year ago, we were 50. Today we are more than 100. Most of the team are biologists, PhDs, food engineers, really working hard towards this mission to making this what used to be a concept, an idea, a theory, to a real reality product that people can consume safely and enjoy it.
If it comes to scaling up this technology of cultivated meat, so how far are you at this moment, at this stage?
Right. So right now, a few members of our team are in the US, meeting with a design company that we hired to design this large-scale, first-in-the-world facility to commercially manufacture cultivated meat. The first large-scale facility will be in the US. We will announce this very soon, the location meaning. And right now in our office, we have a pilot facility, a 600-liter facility that is up and running for more than a year now, basically proving the technology from lab scale to pilot scale. And now the next jump is commercial scale manufacturing. So we are working very hard towards that. We are aligning our efforts to allow large-scale commercialization. So for that, we need regulatory approval. For that, we need a way to manufacture the product. We need to have a product in place. So the first product we will launch would be a chicken product. We are building a facility in the US to allow this manufacturing. And we are working with the regulatory bodies for them to give the approval so we can start large-scale commercialization of the product.
To go to the market, you need this regulation.
Correct.
There is the FDA in the States. So what's the most challenging in this approval process for you as a startup or a scale-up?
Right. So this is a new industry, right? This is a new product we are coming with. So scale-up is an issue because this was never done before. Yeah. Regulation is an issue because there is a set of framework for regulating novel food. So we are part of cultivated meat is a novel food, but it's also a different kind of novel food. So now what we see is that different regulatory bodies around the world are structuring the framework, the regulation, to allow for a process to approve cultivated meat. And we've been in voluntary discussions with the US regulatory bodies for a couple of years now. We are engaged with other bodies around the world. And the purpose is really to give them the information, what is cultivated meat and what is not cultivated meat. To send them, the test, the different, tests that we do on the product, on every stage of the product. We're trying to do whatever we can to give the information for the regulatory bodies. And we need also to remember, regulation, it's the gatekeeper, right? The regulatory bodies are the gatekeepers. They're protecting all of us from who knows what. And so their responsibility is great. We cannot underestimate that. We need to find a way to translate this innovative technology, to educate, and really to examine what it is and what it is not, in order to allow them to approve the product so the people can trust this and can consume this. So we are working very hard with the regulatory bodies to allow this process to be, and we believe that within a year or two we will see achievements in this process.
Interesting remark on that people trust in these products. So if it comes to acceptance, consumer acceptance, are there any studies about consumer acceptance if it comes to cultivated meat? Do you have insights on that?
Yes, very much so. There are a number of bodies, also non-profit, that are doing different research about the acceptance for cultivated meat in different countries. And obviously, let's also say the obvious, food is very cultural, it's very localized, right? What people may like here in Vienna, other people in other places in the world may dislike, or vice versa. So it's very cultural and very local. And what we're seeing, and we've also been doing this consumer research in the US mainly, and we see a great eagerness to try the product. And there is an awareness of cultivated meat and that it is coming. And we see this not necessarily only at the Jay-Z type, community, but also at older populations. This is coming, right? And more people are aware of this, and more people asking questions what it is. And I think we see this also in general, right? I think more and more people, when they go to the retail stores to shop a product, they look at the label, right? They look at the ingredients. So people are also becoming more and more aware of this. So that's why we're also seeing, questions are being asked about what is cultivated meat, what's the process. People want to trust us, and we understand this. Future Meat, we're one of the few companies in the world that we are actively publishing our manufacturing cost for a serving plate, for example. We do this because we understand the need to build this transparency with the industry and with the consumers. So I think as an industry as a whole, we have a lot of work to do so the consumers can trust the product and can try it. And I think once they try it, everything else will be obvious.
You also managed, and you are quite transparent on the price, you managed to lower the cost for chicken breasts, for example.
Correct.
If you compare it to conventional meat, are you still already cheaper?
Well, not cheaper, but before we're looking at that, we need also to remember what are we comparing ourselves to, right? Traditional meat in many places, if not all in the world, is heavily subsidized. So the price is, skewed to one way or another. So we need to note that as well. But we're also seeing now the prices of traditional meat rising for various reasons, but we see them rising. So there's a question of when do you compare yourself and to what do you compare yourself? That's one point. The other is we still have a way to go. The last publication we've made was that the manufacturing cost of a chicken breast is $1.70. Just for reference, 10 years ago in the Netherlands, Professor Mark Post did the first cultivated burger. That burger cost $300,000 to make. So we're making quite advancements. And we still have a long way to go. And the ability for Future Meat to really announce a $1.70 product is really thanks to the R&D team headed by Professor Nachmias. They're working very hard on many elements on the manufacturing process to allow this reduction of cost. And, COVID brought a lot of things to the world. Some are not as good, some are. One of the examples is that before COVID, Future Meat was on the verge of signing with a pharmaceutical company to develop media. The media is the food for the cells. And then COVID hit, and no international cooperation could have existed. And so the team said, okay, well, let us examine this. And we've developed our own proprietary media recipe, which works amazingly with our cells, which is why we're able to achieve a better process, have a more cost-effective manufacturing process. So we're working very hard for this, and this is really, the price, the manufacturing price, this excludes shipping, logistics, packaging, it's not yet the final price. But this, which is already very cheap, is really thankful to the technological advancements that we were able to achieve and are working on in order to really allow this to be a commodity.
One interesting question is also on how cultivated meat will change also agriculture. So do we see really a disruptive change within the next 10, 20 years if it comes to livestock, if it comes to farmers? So how will the future look like from your perspective?
It's a good question, how the future will look like. I'll give you my take on this. The first is, let's look at the word itself, agriculture, right? Agriculture is really a word comprised of two words. Agri, which is working the land, and culture, right, which is like working the mind or the spirits. So agriculture is really working the land. And I think what we're doing is the same thing. We're not working land, but we're working to provide food. So I think what we're doing in cultivated meat is the new agriculture in a way. Secondly, and about the future. So the way I look at this is that future will have many products. We will have traditional meat. I don't think traditional meat is going anywhere. We will have plant-based products. We will have products made from fermentation technology. And we will have products made from cultivated meat. And consumers will choose, what they like the most from a wide variety of decisions. With that, I think the percentage will change. I think with time, we'll probably see less traditional meat, more of the others. But there will be a place for everyone. And I think that's important to understand. The solution in the future is not necessarily one product or the other. It's a balance. Life is all about balances, right? So it's a balance of what is the right balance for us, in where it comes for food or when it comes to clean energy or whatnot. We'll need a balance.
You mentioned also that conventional meat is subsidized in in lots of countries. How are regulations? How is taxation? Are there some states already thinking about, I don't know, to have special subsidies for cultivated meat? Is there any discourse about it? And are there any associations also, I don't know, fighting for that or lobbying for that?
So I'm not aware of any direct subsidies for products. What we are seeing around the world, for example, in the US, President Biden announced a few days ago an executive order to see how can the government support, the R&D for new type of foods, including cultivated food. So that is a step that we're seeing. And we're seeing this in other countries as well, where the government is actively trying to help and finance, through different grants or programs, R&D in this field. So this is one thing. And by the way, this is a very substantial effort. In Israel, we have such a strong ecosystem, partly because of the support the government, through the Innovation Authority and other bodies, are providing for startups and so on. So we do see more and more of this. I think from the standpoint of, let's ask what the government can do. So there's a lot that can be done there. Also, in order to ease, you mentioned the traditional farms and associations. There's a lot that is being done. And I think the regulatory process is part of that. For example, in the US, the USDA asked, how should cultivated meat be called? Right? What should be the right terminology? And different companies and organizations submitted their proposals. And you could see a shift, between who's who, right? Who's offering what, and you can understand why. At the end of the day, I think we need to remember, we are not here to replace. We're here maybe to change the balance. We're here, all of us, to have a better world that we can live in, right? We have one world, so there's no one solution. We can't always just look at the past and be afraid from changes. We human beings, right? We always prefer not to have changes. But if we do it in small steps, if we do it together as an ecosystem, if we educate people and we answer the tough questions as well, then I think a lot of the tension will lower, and we understand that everyone has its place. And we need to work together. And I think that we're seeing this in more and more places. But I think once we'll have the first country large countries such as the US or other giving regulatory approval for the product, then it will be an interesting point in time to assess this. But we're doing whatever we can to really be transparent and say, we're not here to take someone out of business. We're here to work together so we'll have a better future for all of us.
How will we see a future market of these meat products if it comes to also different players? Is there enough space for many players, or is it a winner-takes-it-all principle?
No, I think there's enough place for many players. I mean, the meat industry worldwide, we're talking about, I think, 330 million tons of meat a year or something. It's a gigantic market. There is different reports out there that estimate, there's one from A.T. Kearney, for example, that estimate that by 2040, cultivated meat will be equal in size to traditional meat, each worth $600 million, I believe. So this is a huge market. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that there'll be a place for a number of technologies, right, or a number of offerings, whether it's traditional meat, plant-based cultivation, fermentation, or something else that will come. And I think there'll definitely be a place for a number of actors within each one. What we're seeing, I think, in the world now, we're seeing a lot of plant-based offerings. And if you look at different reports, you see that there's some kind of a plateau with the sales of different types of plant-based products. There are many theories as to why this is happening. We don't need to go into that now, but I think as we'll have, it's like every new industry. You have a boom of offerings, then they have some consolidation of companies, consolidation of products. You have a few products then that stayed on the market, and these are being consumed. And I think we'll probably see a similar pattern. The interesting thing is that you're seeing the traditional food companies, the giants, are all involved in this, right? If it's in Future Meat or other companies, all the big players, the big traditional food players, are involved in most of them. And I think this is a good indication because they understand they need to be at the forefront of technology, right? And if they will adapt, then we will see the offerings, and each one will be able to choose for their own.
Definitely. Last year, you announced the $347 million round. So what comes next? You mentioned the US. Are you also thinking about launching a facility in Europe?
So we announced a Series B round on the amount of $347 million. The majority of that is already secured. And the plan is to build a large-scale manufacturing site in the US. We're working very hard towards that, and this is really the use of proceeds that we see for this. We're also using this to align our efforts for commercialization. So we need a manufacturing site, but we also need partnerships, right? We also need to work with different companies around the world to make this a reality. We can't do this alone. And so we are working very hard on that right now. We're planning ahead. So let's say, just for the discussion's sake, that in the US, we expect to see regulatory approval within a year or two. So US is a big place. We need to have a manufacturing site to support that. We need to have the distribution channels to support that. We need to do the marketing and education to do this. So there are a lot of things that we need to do in the way. As for Europe right now, the regulatory landscape in Europe, the expectancy is that regulatory approval will take a little bit longer than the US. So we are definitely engaged with European actors and players and companies. But the question, to answer your question as to when we will have a manufacturing site in Europe, is really a question of when do we expect to have regulatory approval, and then working backwards from there. Mm-hmm. And we're also having discussions with companies and stakeholders in Asia and other places around the world with this similar mindset. Let's understand what we assume is the regulatory framework. Let's find the right partners we can work with. Let's understand the quantities that we are looking there. And then let's see, okay, when do we need to have a manufacturing site there? How do we do this? Who do we partner with? It's an exciting journey that we're doing, and I'm happy to be part of it.
How would you describe European innovation policy compared to the US or other states?
I will say, I'll answer this from a different perspective. I feel a little bit like a politician. I'll twist the question. I think one of the things that is important to foster innovation is the mindset of we're going to try something, it may work, it may not work, but we're going to run with this and we're going to tweak this and we're going to do whatever we can to make this work. And I think Israel, being the small state that it is, in a tough neighborhood, some may say, and it's not a big market, so the market is outside. So with this, all these elements, when there's a technology and suddenly becomes a need, Israelis go for it and they try it, and if they fail, they try again. And I think different cultures around the world act differently with this kind of mentality, right? If we speak about failures, Israeli mentality in the startup ecosystem is if you tried something and you failed, that's good. That's a learning curve. You take this as, as something good and something you can tell, and you go and you try again. Mm-hmm. Other cultures around the world feel less so with failure, right? Some cultures see it as a shame. They don't speak about it. So I think in general, innovation needs to come from the sandbox that you enable it to work within. And it's a safe environment. You shouldn't, if you tried and failed, you should learn from this. Don't criticize and stop trying. Learn, understand what you could do better, and try again. And I think this is something that more and more industries around the world are starting to embrace, I believe. And also the entire concept of innovation comes from the academia. You need capital, so you need different institutions to provide that capital. You need, as I said, that sandbox to allow this to happen. And we definitely have this in Israel with the Innovation Authority that is giving different programs and cash for R&D and development. We see programs for scaling up as well, not only for R&D. There's this entire feeling within the ecosystem that we can speak to each other and learn and get advice from someone who's maybe your competitor. And I think that's a model that many other countries around the world are starting for a few years now to build as well. And I think that's, only if we work together and we really want to do this and we are willing to take the sacrifice as well, then we can succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yaron, one last question. You're here because of the Green Peak Festival.
Correct.
It's a festival here in Austria that brings together different stakeholders from politics, but also from economy, to find solutions for a more sustainable world. So you have been also a speaker at the festival, and you also attended this festival. There were also people from the startup scene, from the Austrian startup scene and the investor scene. So what connections have you made here?
Wow. First of all, it's a great festival. The way it was organized and executed so far, really wonderful. The ability to see, firstly, the startups who pitched as part of this festival is really kind of a glimpse into the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem here in Vienna or in Austria, which was excited to see, really is. Secondly, yes, I think I met a number of individuals who are coming from traditional food companies, the ecosystem, investors and so on. As this is a new industry that is growing, this alternative protein and cultivated meat in specific, these kind of events really help to make the connections. I mentioned a number of times education. These events are what enable education, right? Because you have these gatherings of people and you share ideas and you talk about this. So definitely, I think this event, for me specifically, I'm here for 24 hours, but in these 24 hours, I've met a number of individuals from different stakeholders in this industry, and back-to-back meetings in this. So it's exactly the forum that we want to participate in and to try and help and educate and make connections so we'll be able to succeed in the future.
Yaron, thank you very much for
you.
this interesting talk and also the insights. We're already curious how Future Meat will perform in the future with this game-changing technology.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned until the next time.